I hope my screen is visible to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Perfect.
ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll be talking about developing learners' global competence and what is the teacher's take in that. So this is, I don't have any capsules to offer you by swallowing which we all will become, able people to enhance the global competence of our learners. But I'll be sharing some thoughts, a few practices that I'm familiar with that have become successful in classrooms, and some input for you to think about and to apply in your own classrooms. And I would like to begin with an apology that I'm totally unwell. As I told in the beginning, I'm expecting my COVID test result this evening, and in all probability I'll be positive, so totally sick. But yeah, sick in the sense I'm ill, but I'll try to pull it along as much as possible. Now I need responses, some quick responses about what do you mean by being educated. Just a few responses, one or two or three. If you can put in the chat box or unmute yourself and speak to me, I would be grateful. For you, what is the meaning of being educated?
Being part of a society which gives.
Being part of a society which gives.
Yes, yes.
All right. Okay. Then anything else?
Gaining knowledge.
Gaining knowledge. Okay. One more. So knowledge, society, anything else? All right. Want of time, so I'll move ahead. I think there is something in the chat box. Is there something?
Yes, yes, I'll read it now. To
Yeah.
earn skills and values.
Good. To earn skills and values. Okay, perfect. So you talked about being a social animal, or being a socially responsible person by giving and taking, and then earning knowledge and skills as well, and values. Fantastic. Pretty much summed up. All of us have heard about Second World War, and we know about Hitler, and we know about a couple of others as well who were the masters of cruelty. Okay, and I would like to invite your attention into this quote by Haim Jinot. This actually defines my philosophy of teaching. So I thought I'll share it with you. He was an Israeli educational psychologist who was a Holocaust survivor. Okay, so he writes to the teachers, and this is something that I always think about when I go about teaching, when I start a new class, or when I talk to my colleagues or scholars. I'm a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no person should witness: gas chambers built by learned engineers, children poisoned by educated physicians, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot by high school and college graduates. So, I'm suspicious of education. My request is this: help your children become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, or educated Aikmans. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are important only if they serve to make our children more human. So I think we don't have to explain it any further. You talked about knowledge, you talked about skills, you talked about values, and the giving and taking from the society to the society. So we all know about it. Now the question is, are we all practicing something like this in our classroom, or are we just going there? You might be teaching thermodynamics, somebody else might be teaching Java, C++, whatever, or someone else will be going and teaching communication skills, physics, environmental science. Are we just doing it? Or are we actually creating something similar to what Haim Jinot had talked to us about? which is making our students a little more humane. I would put it as humane, because there's a difference between being human and being humane. A human being can be a human being without any humane values. We have seen it. Otherwise, how can crime rates go up in a country like ours, which always, boasts about our tradition and our Sanskriti, whatever? We need to think about it. So this is just a thought input for you. Please introspect, because all sorts of philosophy evolves out of introspection, which means we sit for ourselves in our own quiet period and then think about our own practices. If we are not able to do that, then there is a serious problem in our outlook, in our perspective on any kind of thing. And this is a program that you have organized to talk about value education. So are we inculcating any kind of values? I'm sure that you must have heard this before, because I think mine is the last session. So in the previous sessions you must have heard such similar kind of questions, perhaps the same question. But let me just ask you to introspect. Ask this question to yourself: am I just that ordinary teacher who goes and teaches my subject, and I do that perfectly well? I make PowerPoint presentations, I project it, I give them lecture notes, I take them to the lab, I am with them when they learn. All that is fine. But as part of my teaching, is there any change towards making them a little more humane? Ask that question. Now, in that case, what is teaching? Please ask that again. Okay, am I just a teacher who goes and teaches them the subject that I have to teach them, or am I doing something else for which they are going to remember me forever? This forever concept, I too don't believe, because we all are human beings who are rooted in time and space. Now I may do something with utmost sincerity and honesty and all, and this moment will be relic of the past a little later for me, and that doesn't take away the beauty of the moment. Now I lived, and this moment is beautiful, this moment is so real, and I'm so truthful. Doesn't mean that I have to stick to this this notion all the time. So whatever you do in a classroom will have a lot of implications, because that moment is so truthful. And even if that passes by, even if you change your views the day you went and talked something about in the classroom, that stays in the memory of so many students, say 60, 65, or 40, 45, whoever. Therefore, teaching is an art where you will be inculcating a lot of values, as you said, skills and knowledge, and a lot of other things as well. Now, I would like to ask you another question. But before that, let's look at this crow. This crow is a very popular crow, and this is not just one crow. There are so many crows. If you just go on YouTube and check, you can see that in different parts of the world you can see such type of crows. They have to break the walnut, and they cannot do it with their beak because the beak is not strong enough. Therefore, they read the traffic signals, and they place it when it is the right time, and allow until the time a car or some other vehicle runs over it and cracks the walnut. They'll wait at the roadside, and when it is time, when they make sure that there is no possibility of an accident, they fly again after reading the signal and catch it and come back and eat it. So the crows can do that. And what do we think about human beings? We have the special intelligence, and we are the supreme human beings. Now things are being challenged, okay? Because cyborgs are coming. There are so many other artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. There are so many things that is happening in the world in terms of technology, and we are being challenged. But still, somewhere deeply rooted in our heart, we know that human beings are supreme creations. Okay, because any kind of cyborgs are also a creation of human beings. We think, we rationalize it that way. So if a crow can do this, just think about it. After passing the school, maybe the 10th standard, are our students, are our children able to solve problems this way? I remember I had a person in my mind, or I have a person in my mind when I say this, who was doing his LLB, and he had to pay his first semester fees. He didn't know what was a DD, demand draft. So all this while, when he was educated through schools and college and all, he was learning all these banking concepts and things like that. But he never had the chance to go to a bank and then take a DD, remit a DD. No idea at all. So are we actually giving the skills that you have been talking about? Somebody said skills and values. Okay, values, we know what is happening in our society, how children are involved in crimes. Something really heartbreaking has happened in Trichy quite 2 weeks back, I think. So if you have read the newspaper, you will understand how little children are involved in crimes. So values, we have to really talk about it. But then skills, are we giving any type of skills to the students, or are we just giving them knowledge in the sense the text based knowledge? Ask these questions to ourselves by placing our students in front of our eyes and in our minds. Now, what are the skills required for a 21st century learner? I need some responses in the chat box, please. We talked about skills. So what could be the skills that are required?
Digital skills, ma'am.
Good. Digital literacy. Very good. What else?
Communication skill, ma'am.
Good. Excellent. Communication skills. Digital literacy, communication skills. What else?
Critical thinking.
Very good. Absolutely. Critical thinking.
Innovation. Innovative.
Yes. Innovative kind of thinking, which will come in creativity. Yes. So that is, yes. Good. Okay. If I had time, I would have invited more opinions, and I'm sure that you people would have come up with all of them actually. So there are two types of skills that are required. One is thinking and learning skills, and the other one is social and emotional skills. And when we talk about value education or value based education, we are largely focusing on the social and emotional aspect of it, though we are carrying out quite a few of them. You look at it: creativity, critical thinking, digital literacy, all of them, all the thinking and learning skills you have mentioned. Communication you have mentioned, which is a social and emotional skill. Can you see this? When we actually think about the 21st century learner, more of it goes towards the thinking and learning skills, which is more nuanced, which is more fine-tuned, and which is more specific to this knowledge construction. Okay? And we do not really think about, so one second, please. I have a child at home. She's just roaming around and playing with a kite. Yeah, sorry about that. So we largely focus our attention on thinking and learning skills, which are quite into this knowledge imbibing, or which are into knowledge creation and co-creation and other things. But we really don't think about social and emotional skills. If you have been through the document, National Education Policy, the new one, 2021, you would see that there is a lot of emphasis being given on social and emotional skills and their development from KG to the higher education level. That is very important. So now it doesn't mean that it's only now that we have acknowledged the importance of it. In the previous education policies also, references were there, but now it has become more evident because the times have changed. We are into the age of social media, and a lot of changes with pandemic itself. A lot of changes have happened. Now we can think about a hybrid classroom. Earlier it wasn't possible. So now when we say that we are going offline, one question always comes to my mind: if the students are sitting in the classroom with their laptop and making notes on the laptop, how would it look to me when I go there? 60 students with laptops in their hands, and then they are typing whatever. I cannot go and check or peep into whatever they are doing. But shouldn't I, as a teacher, give some kind of respect to their, identity of being digitally literate over the pandemic period? And then they were using it, they were using their phones, they were using their laptops, and shouldn't they be allowed when we have an offline situation as well? Think about it. These are some questions that as educators we need to really consider. And then when we find a solution, my solution will be totally different from yours. So what should actually equip us? We should actually know what are the qualities that, or what are the skills that a 21st century learner should have. And similarly, if a 21st century learner should have all these skills, it also means that the educator should actually be well versed in these skills. If the educator doesn't have it, then how are we going to give that skill to the students? Think about your own children. When I say this, I even think about my 7-year-old girl. So if I'm not able to inculcate these skills in myself, then I cannot give it over to somebody else. And we always narrow it down to the thinking and learning skills, which is creativity, critical thinking, digital literacy. And among them, we do not give much importance to learning to learn, because we don't think about it. We think that learning is enough. Okay, you have all the rules, you have all the theorems, we can learn it, and that's it. No, how do we learn about it? What is the learning style? My learning style will be totally different from your style, just like my teaching style differs from your style. You might be doing an amazing job. Think about that physics professor who does the experiment with pendulum. I'm sure that you people must have seen it in YouTube. There's one video. We don't think about the character of the teacher, right? Because he is into many scams. We don't think about that. We look at that classroom activity that the teacher does and how amazingly he teaches. So that is kind of, when we do that, we are actually learning to teach. Similarly, the students have that, should have that skill to learn. They need to identify what kind of a learner I am. Am I actually learning well when I watch something, or when I do something, or when I read something, when I read and write something? What type of a learner I am, and what works, what learning strategy works best for me? So these are all part of learning to learn. And are we helping our students to learn, or are we just helping them to learn? Please think about it. And now, when we come to value education, we talk about social and emotional skills. As you said, communication is very important. Collaboration. So it's between the students, between the teacher and the students. There's a lot of communication and collaboration that should happen. And how many of us are able to do that? See, being an English teacher, a communicative English faculty, I can tell you that there is a lot of communication, collaboration, emotional development and all happening in my classroom, because I'm aware of it. Okay. It does not mean that my colleagues who are working in the CSE department do not do that in their class. I've seen some beautiful teachers, in the sense, I'm not talking about their outlook. I'm talking about them as teachers, the soulful teachers who are doing, especially the mathematics teachers, how amazingly they put forth the concepts. There are so many amazing teachers around us. Only thing is that we need to look at them. We need to have that ability to collaborate with such people, and then implement certain practices that will be functional in our context. You cannot just look at somebody from the US who has a very smart classroom, and the level of students are also totally different, and then they are all English speaking crowd, and you cannot just implement the same kind of strategies that the teacher does there and become very successful there into your classroom in India, which could be a deprived kind of situation compared to the US situation. So we need to be able to adapt ourselves to different strategies, different possibilities, fine-tune it and befit it into our own needs, into our own circumstances. And for that, we need to really understand our learners first. And how many of us are actually able to connect with the students? I'm not saying that you have to be friends with the students. I am somebody like that, but I don't advocate it to everyone, because there is a big difference between a teacher being a friend and a teacher being accessible to the students. You should not be emotionally blackmailed by your students by saying that now you know the entire story. I am totally like depressed and I'm not able to submit my assignment, but you know my story, so yeah, help me out. That is emotional blackmailing, and you should not be a victim to that. I'm not saying that your social and emotional skills should be in at that level that you empathize with the students, and then you just don't do your job properly. No, I listen to students, I hear their cries and everything else, and I help them to come out of it. I give them options. Not like, okay, you don't submit your assignment, I'll give you marks. No, not that way. I can reduce the difficulty level and I can rate you out of that, because I cannot cheat the other students, right? So there are decisions that we make. Okay. So social and emotional skills for a teacher includes all of this: communication between the peers. How many of us communicate with our own colleagues? Of course, you will talk to them, but there is the story that Shiv Khera talks about in his book You Can Win. Shiv Khera is one management person, management guru, who's much celebrated in India, elsewhere as well. So he talks about the story of crabs being exported, and it is exported to a foreign country. And when they were taking the stock, they realized that one pack is actually not sealed. It's not closed even. The lid is not there. But when they counted, not even one crab was, misplaced or missing from that. So live crabs. So they were really amazed, and they asked, "How is that possible? And where is this consignment from?" And then they find that it's from India. Okay, and then the person gets really concerned about it and asks, "How is that possible? Because if it is open, the crabs should escape." And the Indian person who was there, he says that no, that doesn't happen that way with Indian crabs, because one crab tries to escape, the other one pulls it down. So Shiv Khera talks about this to explain what is crab mentality. So think about it. When we talk about imparting or inculcating social and emotional skills and thinking and learning skills, which are the 21st century skills among our learners, are we actually communicating and collaborating with our own peers? And this is one big step that we need to take towards our own professional development. There is some kind of trust factor that should be there in any kind of department, be it mechanical department, be it humanities department, be it management department, wherever it is. You need to have some kind of collegiality or at operational level. You don't have to make friends at your workplace, but you need to have a clear definition of what is collegiality. And if you cannot collaborate with each other, it's very difficult. I'm a person who goes and team teach. I can teach with somebody else, but it depends on who that somebody is as well, because I cannot just go and do that with anybody, right? There should be some kind of similarity in the style of our teaching, in the style of our researching, in the style of our approach. So we need to really think about our own positioning in a classroom in terms of our social and emotional skills. And emotional development, as I told you, there is a clear demarcation between being empathetic and being emotionally blackmailed. We need to understand that. Now, the last one is something that we need to really think about: social responsibilities. What is my social responsibility as a teacher? When you know that, you know what kind of social responsibility should be inculcated among your students. I'll move on. So, this is effective learning according to Cambridge. They find that learning to learn, critical thinking, collaboration, all of them intersect at learner autonomy. Together, they can actually create a learner who is self-sufficient, who is self-directed. Okay, they can actually take care of their own learning. It doesn't mean that the teacher becomes obsolete or the teacher become outdated, but the teacher's role will be minimal. Now, look at the global competence model that I would like to share with you, and you need to really think through it. it's a wheel where, it is based on knowledge, values, attitudes, and skills. You look at it, you have mentioned all of that, right? You talked about knowledge, you talked about values, you talked about skills, and you talked about the give and take bit. I think that you actually meant about responsibility and all, which comes in attitudes. So these are the basic, uh, you know, ground realities on which we have to build the competence model. And then when you look at it, the students, after any kind of education, should be able to examine local, global, and intercultural issues. We cannot just think that, okay, Panimalar Institute of Technology situated in Tamil Nadu, it can only deal with, we will talk about the situations inside Tamil Nadu. No, you will talk about other states of India. You'll talk about problems in a pan-Indian context. And not only there, we'll talk about US, we'll talk about UK, we'll talk about other European countries or Australia. We'll talk about global problems, right? Other Asian countries. So the students should have that intercultural competence, understand and appreciate the perspectives and world views of others, engage in open, appropriate, and effective interactions across cultures. So India itself is a, such a big cultural port, if you can call it that way. So many things merge in that. It's a melting pot. Take action for collective well-being and sustainable development. This is an area that I work in. You might be thinking, what do I do with sustainable development? There are so many things that we can do. I don't do that at a philosophical level, but I actually do practice it in my classes. And it's really working. And when I say that it is working, you cannot think that, okay, she has 62 students in her classroom, and after she finishes one semester, all of them will be practicing certain things for sustainable development. Don't think that. But I see my success as, countable when at least 2 or 3 people make some changes to their lifestyles or their pattern of, being engaged in socially responsible activities. We cannot do miraculous things with a magic wand. We cannot do that, but we can do that small little bit. It may not make a big change, but we can actually be the change, as Gandhiji puts it. That small little bit that we can do. It doesn't mean that you have to start something at a big magnificent scale or anything. I remember in one of the institutions that I worked before, it was in a very secluded kind of place. I am basically a storyteller. If I had time, I would have given you so many stories from my classroom, because I feel like stories are more telling than any other philosophies being put in nice words. It's better to talk and then find out things from there. So this place was a little secluded, and acres of land we had around us, wasteland or vast land, whatever you want to call it. And we found that, we in the sense, one day by chance, a few of us, me and some of my students, we found that the waste from the cafeteria, like the paper plates, paper cups, plastic bags, all those waste materials, they collect it and they take it from the campus. So we think that they're going to process it somewhere else. Okay. But we realize that they're going and dumping it into this land, which is not now being used for agricultural purpose. Earlier, it was a farmland. So they just dump it there. One day, the bus went that way, and we found that all these waste from our college is being dumped there. So the students' buses also pass that way. I had a discussion in my class the next day about environment, nature protection, and other things. And I just brought this into their notice, because we all were traveling in a line of buses, and all of us have seen that. Some of them noticed it and they were concerned about it. Some of them thought that what can we do about it? So I made them into different groups. And I said, you are engineering students, right? You should be troubleshooters. You should be problem solvers. So find out. And I knew that I was using the design thinking framework. I was giving them a task. They had to go and solve that problem. in their group, whatever way. Finally, they said, we can do this, we can do that, so many options. I said, which is practical? Now think about a working model, which is practical now. You have all these projects which are like crores of rupees. Which one is actually practical now? If we want to implement it right now, what we can do? Think about it. And they said that one group said that, ma'am, we should not ignore the reality. We are still in India, and it doesn't matter where we are. We cannot just trespass or go beyond the authority. So we need to route it through proper channel. I said, yes, point, good point. So how do we do that? And then everybody started thinking about it. The other 10 groups also started thinking about it. And then this group already had the plan. They said, we will write a letter to the vice chancellor. I said, good. What will you write? We'll say that, these are the problems. We'll take some pictures when we go there next time. And then our day scholars can go and get some pictures. And we will attach the pictures and we say that this is totally wrong. We are an educational institution right there in the heart of the capital city. We are not supposed to do this. They did that. So I was teaching them letter writing. Okay, I was still doing my professional communication course with them where business letters and formal letters were being taught. So in between, I taught them that as well. Okay, this is the structure. If you are emailing, this is the pattern. So they learned both. And they did all of them had a signature campaign and all. They submitted it to the VC and the VC saw the point. So in another 1 week's time, there was a major meeting happening and they made decisions about this and they started, processing it in the right way. They tied up with the government and they found out where these, waste could be dumped. And they gave strict warning to the canteen people as well. So this actually started making the students feel like, okay, they could be part of a change. Okay, small little one, but then I don't see it as small little one because, after 1 month when we passed by that way, that place was clean. Think about the vegetation, think about the, the living beings which are there. They're not being, and then stray dogs are not increasing that, in that area. There are so many things to it. There are so many aspects to it. One single act of writing a letter. And it needed a lot of brainstorming. Together, we had to think about it a lot. So that is why I said I do my little bit of activities in my classroom for sustainable development practices. Then we thought about carbon footprint, not footprint, footprint. So they started going to the canteen and checking it out. And a few of them had an oath taken in the classroom. From each group, someone or the other came and they said that we will eat in whenever possible. We will not take away things because that can reduce the chance of using a plastic bag. And my students started carrying a plastic bag in their bags in case if they want to carry something that could leak. And they always had one cloth bag. I'm talking about engineering students. And I felt really good about it. At least 60 of them tries something which is actually making a difference. And over 2 semesters, after 2 semesters, by the end of the 3rd semester, I found that at least 12 students still practice that. The others lost it because we don't give that. I was not teaching them anymore. And there were no discussions on this going on. So what I'm trying to say is that I do something, I walk out of my class and that ends there. Being students, even though they are a little adult compared to school children, they need some kind of continuous support in developing this global competence. Therefore, if teachers have something similar in their ideology, even if Kartika is not there, somebody else might be walking in and that person might be teaching environmental science, physics, chemistry, mathematics, or computer science, doesn't really matter. There'll be some input in the form of design thinking where this problem solving comes in so that the students can actually be conscious about their other social responsibilities, which will definitely help them think about what I have left in the classroom. You may not be talking about the environmental issues. You might be thinking about develop a project where you can think about an app for helping the rural students during the pandemic. Think about it. You might be asking them to think. So that actually triggers their social commitment or their social responsibility, which will get them come back to the previous thing that they have done. It reminds them of it. We are all human beings. Trust me, it works like a chain. You do something good to somebody, and that person may not be able to give you back that. So this is called paying forward. Okay. I help you. You are not able to give me that help. I mean, give that help back to me. But when you do that to somebody else, there'll be someone else paying me that. I'm not talking about just money. Could be anything. So this paying forward model, it happens. That is the cosmic law. Whether you believe in spirituality or not, or whether you have a god or not, this is the cosmic force in operation. It will come back to us. So it's a wheel. I'm not talking about Indian philosophy. I'm talking about what happens in our real life. We pay forward. We don't pay back. We cannot pay back all the time. We pay forward. So we need to actually help the students to believe in this and continue with this, model of global competence. Now, when you talk about social and emotional learning, we are talking about attitudes or knowledge, skills, which can actually help them to develop healthy identities, manage their emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. These are very important skills. So in our classes, whether you are a computer science teacher or a teacher of mechanical engineering or automobile engineering, you have to help your students to develop these core competencies. And for that, you need to actually fine tune your own teaching philosophy a bit. I have around 15 minutes to finish it off. So I'll move forward. Self-awareness. One person should be able to reflect. That is what I began the speech with. One's own feelings, values, and behaviors. And for that, we need to first do that. And then we need to help the students to go for that self-awareness bit. A lot of thinking activities are possible. And you might be wondering, where do I get the time? Because I have the syllabus constraints and all. And that is where the trick is. That is where you need to introspect your competency as a teacher and see how can you implement this project-based kind of learning in your classes. Social awareness, we have already talked about it. Relationship skills, that is important. How can we connect positively with peers, teachers, families, and other groups? I'll tell you something interesting that I did in my classroom. We have been discussing a little controversial kind of issues in our classroom. I was teaching them debate and group discussion. So micro skills for debates and group discussions were the topic as part of the professional communication course that I was taking. This was a little controversial topic. And I found that the students are emotionally so driven that they started calling out names, and they started, that was the offline context, okay? 2018, I'm talking about. There were a lot of problems in the classroom. And they had particular ideologies about, even eating habits. And it was going beyond any kind of control. So and then it went on like that. And somebody said, in that case, you have to go and live in Pakistan. And I was shocked. I could not take that at all. I said, you have to stop now. And what is this between India and Pakistan? So they had strong points about India and Pakistan. I said, come on, let's just stop it. Let's just look at it in a very different perspective. What do you think? Why do you think you have this perspective? We have learned our history. Though we are engineering students now, we have had our history lessons. I said, okay, what could be the history lessons that Pakistani students will be learning? Do you think the same history they'll be learning? And there is a beautiful documentary, thought-provoking one. I don't have the link right now, but you can find it out, by an Indian journalist. He went and he met girls school students and then ask them about what is their idea about India as it is there in their history book. You should listen to that. Largely it's in Hindi or in Urdu. It's shocking because that is not the history that we learn. It's totally different. And then this journalist started talking to them very quietly, very nicely, very pleasantly. The girls were agitated initially, but then they calm down and they say that we know that this is not the case, but this is the history that we learn in our books. This I watched it long back in 2008. I watched it, very powerful. And then they have a healthy kind of discussion. So these are the discussions, or these are the collaborations that happen across cultures, so that there is better understanding and there is clarity in thinking about even foreign policies. So I'm not talking about high level things like that. There was a change after showing them this documentary. There was a huge change in their attitude. They don't watch the match between India and Pakistan with the same kind of verve and enthusiasm they had. They see it as a game. Earlier, it was a nationalist kind of spirit. They are able to see it as a game. So including those kind of controversial issues, a teacher can actually do a lot of things in the classroom. And if I don't do that, if I let it go like that, I'm actually being a part of the problem. So why should I be a part of the problem when I can actually offer some solution? That is a question that I ask myself. I told you I'll be sharing a lot of experiences that I have. And then from there, you need to emulate, or you need to find out what is workable in your classroom and what could be discarded from what I said. Now, self-management, skills that include self-motivation, goal setting, personal organization, self-discipline, impulse control, use of strategies for coping with stress. All these have to be talked about in classroom. Responsible decision making is yet another area. So when I implement something towards global competence, developing the learner's global competence, I make sure that the topic has all these aspects in them. It will come naturally because it cannot just be mutually independent or mutually exclusive. It cannot be. It'll come as an interrelated kind of pack. Therefore, what I would suggest you is to actually try to help them to have something like their self-directedness, which means they're able to look at themselves, they're able to reflect, they're able to take authentic control over their own learning experience. So it's like whatever they have as an available resource around them, the students are able to use that. We'll skip the definitions and all. I can share the slides if you want, if you're interested in knowing more about the processes and all. There are 3-4 steps that are included in self-directedness. I have 5 minutes. I'll conclude that now. Assessing your readiness to learn, setting learning goals. These are about the student's perspective, okay? And we need to know this before we actually go in detail about the teacher's perspective. Evaluating learning. So the students have to have something like, okay, I am ready for learning this. So for that they need to ask a few questions to yourself, okay? It could be something like they are organized, they are like self-disciplined, they don't need anybody else's continuous push to go to school and all. For that, the teacher has a role in that. The way we approach the students will have a role in that. Now this plans, okay? So it's like a learning contract that they sign with themselves. It's not that with the teacher they sign the contract. It's a contract that the students themselves sign. So structure, timeline, details about grading, all those things. There should be transparency. That is where I said we all give course plan initially. Why do we give that? It's to help the students to set their learning goals. I'm sure that you give a course plan. Okay, this week we'll be covering these many topics, and in the second week there will be an assessment. So we give the detailed lesson plans or course plans so that the students can actually set their learning goals properly. Now, they need to actually ask a few questions. What could go wrong in this plan? Okay, and is there too much or too little work? And now the question is, are we actually allowing our students to ask these questions? If they come with these questions, are we approaching it in the right way? Are we actually saying that, yeah, this is a lot of work, so I can actually reduce the burden a bit? Are we saying that? Are we allowed to say that? Think about it. Timeline, evaluation, all that possible? Is it all feasible kind of timeline that you get? We should ask. Engaging in learning process, they need to consider a few questions regarding their instructional methods. Who was my favorite teacher? I asked this question in my classroom, not because I don't have any other job, but I asked them to know what they think. And most of the time, I found that the students like those teachers who were empathetic to them, who were kind to them, rather than being, nobody talked about a strict teacher who was highly knowledgeable. Everybody talked about a combination of a teacher who is hard based and who has the head as well. Like, it's not just the intelligence that they look forward to, was what I said. You must have watched that film, right? Nanban, Three Idiots. So in that, there's a professor who is nicknamed as Virus. And nobody talked about such a teacher being remembered fondly. Never in my career so far. I've been teaching for 8-9 years now, and I have never seen a student telling me that, yeah, I like the teacher, he was so knowledgeable and he was very strict. No, everybody talked about a knowledgeable teacher who was compassionate enough. So that is the teacher being defined by the students. And the students also should know why they like that teacher. Is it just because the teacher didn't care about anything and gave me marks that I like the teacher? In that case, there is a problem, right? So we need to also help the students to think about why they do something, why they like something, why they don't like something. What can they do to improve themselves? We need to ask a few questions. Actually, that is where I'm going to stop. There are 3 types of approaches in engaging in the learning process. One is the surface approach, which is like just you teach something, the students learn and reproduce it. The other one is strategic approach. Okay, so this is like exam oriented kind of teaching. You teach something and they learn it with that exam point of view. I think most of our learners are strategic learners, and after that they may forget that, and when they go to their workplace, whatever is required to achieve that thing, they'll do that. But a deep approach is something that is actually touching the crux of education. That is where the knowledge is actually being imbibed and it is applied in true context. So it's not just like knowing something, but it is applying as well. And then it all culminates with an evaluation of one's own learning. So it's not just the students giving teachers feedback. The teachers have to take some initiative to get some kind of personalized feedback about their own teaching from the students. And the students should themselves look at their own learning, and we should actually enable them to assess themselves as learners. I do that in my class. And one of my professors who writes in the Hindu, the column Know Your English, he has written a very interesting kind of article long back, where it started with his students saying that after one semester, we didn't learn anything. Okay, so this made him think. And what he did was, the beginning of one semester, he gives them a task and they write something. They were complaining about their writing skills. They didn't improve their writing, was their complaint. And then he got it back and got it in his custody. And then at the end of the semester, he gave a similar kind of question and asked them to write. He didn't grade it. He asked the students to grade it. So everybody was evaluating one's own script, the first one and the last one. And then they got a clear, different mark from the first one to the last one. The questions were not similar. I mean, questions were not the same, but similar difficulty level question. And he asked, is there any change? They said, yes, there is a change. What are the changes? Look at the vocabulary, look at the structure, look at the way you have constructed the sentences, look at cohesion, look at coherence. So Professor Upendran was asking all these questions and the students could actually find that they have improved. So this is one magnificent way in which a teacher like Professor Upendran had made a change in the way the students think about themselves. And it's not just with English, it's possible with every single subject, isn't it? And you people being subject specific specialist, if I have to call you that, you can actually have a lot of visible kind of differences, right? In English, what can we do? We can only see their language being changed and all, but you people are actually helping them to make things. We are in the age of making in India, so we need to really think about helping them, how they have learned, and what is the evidence of their learning, and how better they can actually go ahead with their learning plans and all. So we have talked about all these student role, and then I have partially touched upon the advisors role as well. So rather than we being teachers, we will become advising instructors in this type of a value-based education model, where we focus on the global competence development. So there are some questions for us to think. I will just leave it uncapped without answering, and then I'll conclude with what I call as, or what is called as Socratic questioning. The teacher is not just a purveyor of knowledge, and we are not going to fill in empty vessels. The students are not blank slates. Okay, we are observers, facilitators, and we are documenting the learner's successes and failures, and we promote critical thinking and critical reading. They need to read critically, they need to think critically to create something new. And somebody told us in the beginning that innovation is very important. It is. Creativity is the final offshoot of any kind of education, right? There should be something creative. When I teach language, the student should be able to speak the good variety of language that I'm teaching. And when I teach critical thinking skills, the student has to solve a problem and create something new. So that is the entire purpose of education, and we have to do that. And for that, this is where I stop. We have a few questions that we should actually help the students to ask. Clarification questions, probing assumptions question, probing reasons and evidence questions, questions about viewpoints or perspectives, questions that probe implications and consequences, questions about the question. The last one being the most important one. Once we help the students to ask these questions, they'll be introspecting, they'll be critically thinking, they'll be moving a step towards problem solving and thus to creativity. You remember the Bloom's taxonomy? I'm talking about the steps. They'll be moving upwards from just remembering and understanding to analyzing, applying, and then evaluating, and finally creating. So these 6 types of questions we need to initially ask ourselves, and we need to really think about taking it into our classrooms and asking our students, or helping them to ask these questions themselves, to us, to the world, to their peers, and as I said, to the universe. So that, in that interaction between their own asking questions and the kind of responses that they get, there'll be this model, which is a sustainable model, which is moved towards developing their global competence. Thank you very much for listening to me patiently.